Listener, you stand at the edge of a vast, uncharted topography, not of mountains or oceans, but of economic reality itself. This is no ledger of mere numbers, no spreadsheet of aspiration. It is a mythic atlas, etched in the invisible ink of decisions, where the contours of existence are drawn by the interplay of mind, capital, and consequence. Here, wealth is not a destination, but a succession of inner climates, each level a distinct atmosphere governed by its own gravity, its own prevailing winds. You are invited, not as a tourist seeking spectacle, but as a sovereign mind, to trace these strata within yourself. Identify your present altitude without flinching, without the cheap anesthesia of self-pity or the hollow inflation of ego. Pride, after all, is the only compass that endures. The first level is the realm of fragile survival. Here, existence contracts to the pulse of the immediate. Mindset is pure predation. Every dawn is a hunt for the next wage. Every expenditure a calculus of avoidance. Behavior is reflexive, borrowing against tomorrow to pay for today, chasing overtime or side hustles that devour the self. Numbers are mercilessly narrow. Income equals outgo plus a thin margin of dread. Net worth hovers near zero or drifts into the red, sustained by credit that bites like frost. The emotional atmosphere is a low, constant tremor of scarcity, where the horizon feels perpetually 2 weeks distant. Days possess the texture of frayed rope, mornings swallowed by the commute or the inbox, evenings fractured by the glow of screens tallying what is owed. Risk is not chosen but imposed. A sudden illness or market tremor can unravel the scaffold entirely. Conversations are terse exchanges of survival lore, the cheapest cut of meat, the latest loophole in eviction notices, the whispered envy of those who seem to float above the fray. Sleep arrives as a shallow truce, laced with the static of unpaid invoices and the half-dreamed fear that the alarm will ring before the body has reclaimed itself. To cross from this realm into the second level, the realm of precarious equilibrium, demands no miracle of fortune but a sequence of brutal, unglamorous decisions. You cease borrowing to consume. You audit every outflow with the precision of a surgeon. You forge an emergency reserve equivalent to 3 months' sustenance, not through windfall, but through repeated excision of the non-essential. Honesty here is the scalpel. You admit that your labor has been leased, not owned. The shift is never accidental. It is the fruit of weeks turned into months of deferred gratification, of conversations redirected from complaint to calculation. Once attained, life acquires a fragile steadiness. Mindset evolves from panic to vigilance. Behavior becomes defensive, budgeting as ritual, side income as shield. Numbers stabilize, debt shrinks to manageable ratios, savings form a slender bulwark. The atmosphere lightens to a muted caution, like air after a storm. Days feel less serrated, yet still tethered to the clock. Risk is now monitored rather than endured. A shadow watched from the corner of the eye. Conversations turn tactical. Comparisons of insurance deductibles. Debates over index funds versus high-yield accounts. Sleep deepens into a guarded rest, though still interrupted by the occasional phantom ledger. The third level, the realm of structural stability, emerges only when vigilance hardens into architecture. The crossing is forged in 2 relentless acts. First, the elimination of all consumer debt through avalanche or snowball repayment executed with monastic discipline. Second, the automation of savings and investments at a rate that compounds faster than lifestyle creep. Brutal honesty requires naming the hidden taxes of ego, status purchases, performative leisure, and excising them. Behavior shifts from defense to quiet construction. Multiple income streams are seeded, not chased. Mindset becomes one of calibrated optimism, tempered by the memory of prior tremors. Numbers now describe a modest fortress, liquid reserves of 6 to 12 months, a growing portfolio whose annual yield begins to echo the primary wage. The emotional atmosphere settles into a measured calm, the first true absence of ambient dread. Days unfold with deliberate rhythm, mornings allocated to high-leverage work, evenings to family or craft, without the shadow of tomorrow's shortfall. Risk is engaged selectively, a calculated venture into equities or real estate, never reckless. Conversations deepen into exchanges of strategy among peers who have also crossed. The merits of Roth versus traditional vehicles, the quiet discipline of lifestyle plateaus. Sleep arrives as earned restoration, untroubled by the low-frequency hum of survival. Ascent to the fourth level, the realm of momentum and accumulation, occurs through the deliberate alchemy of leverage. The decisive acts are two. You weaponize your time by delegating the repeatable while mastering the irreplaceable. You redirect surplus not into consumption, but into assets that generate further surplus. Equity in enterprises, income-producing property, intellectual capital scaled through licensing or automation. Honesty demands you confront the seductive lie that more money will solve the feeling. Instead, you accept that scale requires systems. Behavior transforms into orchestration. You audit every hour for return on energy, prune relationships that drain without reciprocity. Mindset crystallizes as stewardship, the recognition that capital is a living force, not a static hoard. Numbers accelerate. Net worth enters the realm where passive income covers 30 to 50% of baseline expenses. Compound growth becomes visible on quarterly statements. The atmosphere is one of gathering velocity, like wind filling sails. Days acquire texture of purposeful expansion, meetings that birth enterprises, evenings spent reviewing trajectories rather than ledgers of want. Risk is now a calibrated companion. Positions sized to survive drawdowns, diversified yet concentrated where conviction lives. Conversations become symposia of builders, discussions of cap tables, tax-efficient structures, the ethics of scaling impact. Sleep is profound, the body's quiet acknowledgement that the machine now runs partly without its constant intervention. The fifth level, the realm of emerging sovereignty, is reached when momentum is no longer labored, but self-sustaining. The crossing hinges on two irreversible choices. You decouple lifestyle from income growth, locking expenses while allowing revenue to compound. You institutionalize your knowledge, mentorship, content, or intellectual property so that your mind earns while you rest. Brutal honesty here strips away the final illusion of control. You admit that true power lies in designing environments where capital works independently. Behavior becomes selective amplification. You say no to opportunities that do not multiply freedom. Mindset is one of serene agency, the quiet certainty that the future is being provisioned by decisions already embedded. Numbers cross a threshold. Passive streams now fund the entirety of a chosen standard of living, with surplus reinvested or deployed toward legacy. The emotional atmosphere is spacious, a high-altitude clarity where anxiety has been outrun. Days possess the texture of chosen rhythm, mornings for creation or contemplation, afternoons for oversight rather than execution. Risk is architectural, portfolios engineered for resilience across regimes, experiments funded from the margin of safety. Conversations elevate to questions of stewardship and philosophy, the moral architecture of wealth, the transmission of values across generations. Sleep is unassailable, a nightly renewal unmarred by the subconscious audit of scarcity. At the sixth level, the realm of mastery and leverage, freedom begins to echo. The transition is forged in the final surrender of ego to structure. You build entities, funds, foundations, operating companies that operate under principles you codified, not under your daily presence. You allocate capital not merely for return, but for asymmetric optionality, philanthropic leverage, venture seeding, geopolitical diversification. Honesty demands you relinquish the identity of the one who makes it all happen. Behavior is that of the conductor. Minimal intervention, maximal alignment. Mindset is sovereign detachment. The wealth now serves the mind rather than the reverse. Numbers describe a self-perpetuating ecology. Net worth measured not in currency but in decades of optionality. Returns compound at rates that outpace inflation and taxation combined. The atmosphere is one of unhurried dominion, like the silence atop a peak. Days unfold as deliberate intervals of presence and absence, time reclaimed for inquiry, art, or communion. Risk is transmuted into probabilistic advantage. Tail events are hedged, black swans anticipated through scenario architecture. Conversations are sparse and consequential, often with fellow architects who speak in the shorthand of systems. Sleep is oceanic, deep, dream-rich, the body's final confirmation that the external world no longer dictates the internal clock. The seventh level is the realm of unshakable freedom. It is attained when mastery dissolves into pure creation. The crossing is the rarest and most intimate. You cease optimizing for more and begin directing capital toward questions larger than your own survival. Civilizational infrastructure, scientific patronage, cultural preservation. Honesty culminates in the recognition that money was never the point. Awareness was. Behavior becomes generative. Resources flow outward in vectors chosen by conviction, not calculation. Mindset is transcendent clarity. The self is no longer defined by the balance sheet but by the questions it chooses to ask of the universe. Numbers become almost ornamental. Abundance is total, yet measured by the freedom to ignore them. The atmosphere is one of luminous detachment, where the economic map itself is seen from above, its contours merely one coordinate among many. Days acquire the texture of myth, unhurried inquiry, mentorship without agenda, the quiet joy of watching ideas outlive their originator. Risk is irrelevant. Volatility is noise in a system designed for perpetuity. Conversations are rare, profound, often wordless collaborations across disciplines. Sleep is communion with the deeper order, rest as preparation for the next unfolding. Listener, you have now traversed the Atlas. Locate yourself not by envy of those above nor contempt for those below, but by the unflinching clarity of your own awareness. Progress is never the imitation of another's visible life, neither their penthouses nor their portfolios. It is the refusal, absolute and daily, to inhabit a level beneath the dignity of what you already know to be possible. The map does not move, you do. Choose.